Men and women of Reddit, what made you not want a second date with someone? She didn't come to the first one. Yeah, I guess that would be a bit tricky, so I mean, maybe you could just start off with only the second date. She showed up at the bar already so drunk that she could not walk without my assistance. 1, she drove herself there. 2, it was 2 in the afternoon. And 3, she wanted to continue drinking as soon as we met there. Well, you know, maybe she was just nervous and didn't want to mess up the date. So I was in the mall one summer day, hanging out with some friends. I see this guy who looked like a friend of mine, so I walked up to him, only to find out that he was not that friend. He was cute, we introduced ourselves, exchanged pleasantries, he gave me his beeper number, and we planned to go get coffee sometime. I was a hot spooky chick, and he was a hot spooky dude. The day arrived. It turned out that he worked at Red Lobster down the road from my house, so I walked over there to meet him after his shift ended. We went to go see The Craft in the second-run theater. We held hands, kissed during the movie. We went to go get coffee after, and we chat. So what year are you? I'm gonna be a junior this fall. Cool, I didn't go to college. College? How old are you? So that's the story about how two strangers vastly over and underestimated each other's ages. I thought he was 17 or 18 and he thought I was around 20. I was 15 and he was 25. He took me right home and we didn't go out again. Yeah, stuff like this just drives me so crazy because there's so many people between the ages of, like they said, around 15 to 25 that could look anywhere in that range. So you could just be like, oh hey, they're cute. I don't know if I'm being considered a pedo right now, but maybe I'll find out. We'd been to lunch a few times, but this was the first real romantic date. We met in biology class in college. She was gorgeous and smart and had a smile that could melt diamonds. I was in a group project with her and took her to lunch, and she confessed that she had a crush on me. So we kissed before going back to class and made plans for a date and went out that night. And we had a wonderful time, until about the time she asked me what my deal breaker for dating was. As in, what trait would someone have that would immediately make me break it off? I said something like, I wouldn't date a racist or a puppy kicker, someone who had a sociopathic streak or was mean, stuff like that. She said that she could date all kinds of guys, fat, skinny, black, white, it didn't matter. The one thing she could not abide, the one kind of guy that she absolutely positively would never ever be with, was a guy with a hairy back. I'm Iranian. The end. You know, having hair in unwanted places seems like a really weird deal breaker because that's a problem you can fix. You know shaving is a thing, right? However, I don't think I've ever seen a single hair on my back, so the whole concept just seems so weird to me. Her boyfriend that I knew nothing about showed up. Oh, you thought you were going on a date with somebody. Turns out they were looking for a third. He spoke over me the whole time. At the end of the date, he said I'd been too awkward because I hadn't spoken much, so he was going to screw me next time he saw me to break the ice. Needless to say, I did not see him again. Now here's a question for you. When you first meet somebody, would you prefer somebody that just barely talked, or somebody who talked way too much? Because I run into people all the time who just barely want to talk, so after a few minutes of me basically just forcing small talk, I'm usually just let's just be done. But if somebody just has a lot to talk about and doesn't mind that I just sit and listen, that doesn't bother me a whole lot. On a first date at a coffee shop, the guy picked up my foot. I was wearing cute sandals. He rubbed my foot for a second, and I was like, what the? Then he put all of my toes in his mouth. At the table, in the coffee shop. Wait, so do girls not like it when that happens? I mean, maybe if it was on the third date, that would be okay, right? She was on her phone 60% of the date. See, when this happens, all you gotta do is pull out your phone and text her saying, hey, I'm up here. She criticized absolutely everything. The car I was driving, the clothes I was wearing, cologne I chose. We were supposed to go bowling, dinner, and then drinks. When an attendant came over to ask if we wanted anything, I ordered my snacks and asked her if she wanted anything. You mean you don't know? What kind of date is this? Halfway through our game, she mentioned I was bringing up the wrong conversation topics. Thankfully, my brother called me out of the blue asking to borrow some fishing gear, and I played it as of work calling me in. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. So I guess some people go into a date with an agenda, they've got exactly everything you're supposed to talk about and everything you're supposed to do for the whole date, and then if it doesn't go that way, then you just have to be pissed all night. This happened last week. When we got to the good old, what do you do for a living? She straight up tried to sell me in on her MLM scheme. When I politely noted I wasn't interested, but I'm happy to go back to our previous discussions, she got argumentative in a good old salesperson losing a client kind of way. When it was clear the mood was ruined and we weren't going anywhere from there, I stood up, paid for our drinks at the counter, and got out. Bonus points for some of my friends coincidentally sitting at the table behind us, and giving her weird looks as she was ranting about the life-changing opportunity. That pretty much solidified my thoughts. Man, these MLM people are thinking of everything. They're even somehow infiltrating our dates. I had more in common with the chaperone she brought to the ice cream shop, and didn't seem to have anything to say that wasn't as a godly person. Like, fine, you brought someone to make sure I wasn't a creeper, I understand that. But when you make it very clear that it's your youth pastor acting as the chaperone, and invite him to sit at our table, then say nothing until the pastor felt bad enough to break the silence to talk to me, maybe don't cry and ask why I don't want a second date. I mean, you really just have to wonder what some people actually want out of dates. Like, sometimes I'll go out trying to meet people, but then I'm like, what am I even looking for in a person right now? Like, I don't even know. Nice and simple. A nice girl gets it out of the way early. So I guess I better tell you that I'm going to expect you to stop talking to any other girls you might have in your life. She then explains, yes, everyone. No, she's serious. She gets jealous easily. That one was the only first date I ever ended early. Even the one where the woman brought her little brother I saw through. See, why can't everybody just be straightforward about their red flags? You usually have to figure it out much later. So I went on a date with a guy, who I have dubbed the PowerPoint guy. He arrived at our first date at a coffee shop, with a literal presentation of non-negotiable demands he required from a future partner, including, but not limited to, must be a housewife, produce him 2 boys and a girl, in that order, gender specified, not work or desire a career, move 500 miles away to live on an acreage in his parents' house, like with them also living there, not have any male friends, but he also wanted someone who was open to sleeping with whoever he chose so he could watch. The list goes on. He didn't ask me a single question about my life or interests, just spat out the list and stuff and talked about himself for 2 hours, at which point I politely bailed. Props to this guy for knowing what he wants, but PowerPoint guy did not land a second date with me. You know, this sounds very much like when you're applying for a job and they list off the qualifications you have to have. I don't know if that kind of thing works super well with trying to find a partner, though. At least not when you are this picky. She had already put our pictures through one of those "what would your baby look like" apps, and started talking about how we would raise them. So you know how some people say that, like, okay, you're taking it a little bit too fast? Like, that's something you probably need to hear right now. Arrived 40 minutes late with no text to say he would be, turned up with his laptop and said he needed to do some work, and gave me some cash to get him a coffee and something I want. I was like, okay, sure, and stood in the queue watching him as he puts on his headphones and opens his laptop. I came back with the drinks, and he said he just needs to finish this, and took a call. I just sat there for another 40 minutes with zero conversation, and him typing and chatting away. This was a Saturday, by the way, and he scheduled the time. After he finished, he said, let's go to a bar, and get a proper drink. We had a chat, and I tried to get to know him, but he was being an arse. He ordered the drinks, and then started having a go at me for not offering to pay, and went on a rant about double standards. To be honest, I was still pissed off about waiting for around 90 minutes, and was not in the mood to pay for his drink or see him again. Man, does this even qualify as a date? Can I just, like, invite somebody to come over and just watch me play a video game for 2 hours while not talking to them at all? He said, yeah, you're an engineer now, but once you get pregnant, you'll move away from working though, right? Just so many assumptions in one statement. Hadn't even gotten our food yet. I mean, I know it's kind of hilarious in a lot of these, people just already talking about marriage on the first date. But here in Utah, that's probably more common than anywhere else. I matched with a guy on Tinder in 2014 while I was in grad school and new to the city I was living in. He seemed cool enough and lived in a small town about 45 minutes outside my city. He offered to take me out for dinner, and I agreed and said I would meet him at dinner, in regards to my own safety. He insisted on picking me up and showed up with a liter of Fireball and sat down on my couch and started pouring shots of it for me and my roommate. He seemed like a genuinely nice guy, just oddly misguided, and that I was not interested in binge drinking Fireball before dinner. He ended up drinking nearly all of it and tried to hook up with me. When I rejected him, he wanted to drive home despite being completely wasted. I forced him to sleep on my couch and locked the door to my room. We never spoke again, but he did try to add me on Snapchat about 4 years later. Man, I think I finally just figured it out. So when you're a young teenager and let's say you have a crush on somebody, you start acting really stupid because you don't know how to handle the hormones in your brain, and so you don't know what to do. Maybe some of these are just the adult version of that. People just don't know how to act. He showed me his giant back tattoo of a demonic jack-in-the-box while in a bookstore, a date location he picked, and I foolishly thought we might have interesting discussion on reading. Turns out he rarely read, and it was just the only place in my city he was familiar with. Hey, he sounded like he was just really excited to show off his giant demonic jack-in-the-box tattoo. He lived with his ex. I mean, yeah, it is kind of terrible when you are stuck living with someone that you are no longer with, because it's like, how do you date anyone at that point? Because obviously bringing somebody over is always gonna look bad. But yeah, that's probably even worse than living with your parents. He left me at the restaurant with the bill when I was in the bathroom. Last blind date I went on. That's an interesting strategy, very tactful. The dude and I had texted and bonded over the fact that we both liked drawing, and decided a fun way to get to know each other on our first date would be to bring our sketchbooks and share what kinds of things we draw. I brought along my little moleskin sketchbook. He brought an accordion file filled with one-page comics. He then proceeded to read every single comic out loud to me, with character voices. There were dozens of comics. His enthusiasm was fine. It was the fact that he never even asked me to share my art with him, and instead he made sure I was his audience the entire evening, instead of an active participant in the conversation. Later in the date, while we were taking a walk, he pointed out a park bench and told me a story of him and his ex-girlfriend aggressively making out on it in the middle of the day, while surrounded by picnicking families. No thanks. Weird flex, but okay. First date was uneventful. We talked about what we did, our backgrounds, upbringings, etc. Vapid nebulous stuff. This was late afternoon Saturday. We partied and I went to the pub to meet some friends. The following morning I slept late and opened my phone to a barrage of messages from my date. She's listing all the things I should have done or said better, and what she found annoying. I'm looking through it pretty hurt. I started to write what I thought. Wow, there's no need for that. Just say thanks and bye. But remember to not text when emotions run high. That afternoon, another message. So when do you want to try again? Think it could be fun? This time I did respond with, never. See, maybe the first date was just a trial run, and you didn't pass, so she's giving you another chance. When I first met him, he kept standing way too close to me, and his breath smelled like cigarettes. Throughout our date, he would start looking around and be clearly listening to surrounding conversations every time it was my turn to speak. Like the moment he would stop blabbing, he would be looking elsewhere to listen to anything but me. At one point, he sneezed into his bare hands, looked at it, and said, yuck, then wiped it on his pants. An hour or so into this, he interrupted me mid-sentence, a sentence that he was paying zero attention to, of course, and says, in what sounded like an attempt at a sexy voice, hey, wanna get out of here? I, seeing it was the late hour of 9 p.m., still said, oh, hey, well, it's getting late, I should get home. I was grateful when I didn't hear from him for a week. Before he texted me asking to hang out again while I was at an event and couldn't really respond right away. He gave a snarky follow-up an hour later because I hadn't responded, which I thought was hilarious because of the hypocrisy. Anyhow, I told him I didn't think it would work out, and that was that. I mean, I feel like it should be pretty obvious in situations like this when there are guys that are just trying to hook up with you. I feel like that's a sense that most women really need to figure out. She talked about her ex-girlfriend of a few months for about half the date, then proceeded to explain to me how she sexually assaulted her when her ex didn't want to have sex with her yet. I kept asking to leave, my things were in her car, but she kept saying that she was having a good time and that she loved that I'm such a good listener. I texted my sister to come get me, and when I informed my date of this, she got upset with me and made me tell my sister to go back home because she wanted to drive me home instead. She even texted me the next morning and told me she had a great time and wanted to see me again. I've never blocked someone so quickly. Well, to everybody who's already married, just be grateful that you don't have to be in the dating game right now. Because I can tell you firsthand that most young people today are just kinda psychotic, and it can be very difficult to get an actual decent relationship with somebody. But anyways, that's the end of the week. We made 5 videos in a row. So have a good weekend, and I'll see you Monday.